The sun was a burning coin hanging over the endless sweep of the Texas plains, and into that shimmering horizon rode a man the settlers whispered about in half-belief, half-wonder, a giant cowboy known only as Jonah Steele, a towering figure with shoulders as broad as barn doors, hands like hammers, and eyes that carried the quiet weight of a man who had seen too much yet still chose to fight for good. Jonah wasn't just tall, he was colossal, his hat riding high above even the tallest men, his boots sinking deep into the dust when he walked. And though his size made him feared by outlaws and envied by ranchers, his heart was gentle enough to stop his horse in the middle of a trail, just to set a fallen sparrow back in its nest. But destiny, as it often does, was about to test the measure of his soul. For far across those plains, a war party of Comanche warriors had returned from hunting only to be ambushed by a band of whiskey-soaked raiders who thought the land belonged to greed rather than honor. And in the chaos, arrows and bullets flew like rain until the Comanche chief, a proud leader named Red Hawk, whose presence commanded silence even in battle, found himself pinned against a ridge, bleeding from his side, his men falling around him as the raiders closed in for the kill. Jonah, riding alone with nothing but the sound of the wind and his stallion's hooves, spotted the smoke, and though every instinct told him it was none of his business, something deep within his chest, perhaps the voice of his long-dead mother reminding him to stand for those who cannot, pulled his reins hard, and with a growl to his horse, he thundered toward the fight. What happened next would be told around campfires for years, because the sight of that cowboy charging into battle was like watching a mountain come alive, his revolvers blazing like thunderclaps, his voice carrying like a church bell as he roared for the raiders to scatter. And scatter they did, some too drunk to aim straight, others too terrified to test the fury of a man who looked more legend than flesh. And when the dust cleared, Jonah was kneeling beside Red Hawk, lifting the wounded chief as though he weighed no more than a child, carrying him on his broad back to the shelter of a canyon, where he stitched the wound with thread from his saddlebag and poured water between the chief's cracked lips. And though words between them were few, Red Hawk speaking in broken English, Jonah answering in the quiet drawl of the plains, their eyes told the truth. Trust was born that day, a bond not of skin or tribe, but of men who understood the sacred duty of protecting life. The night fell heavy, coyotes howling in the distance, but Jonah kept watch, his massive frame silhouetted against the firelight like a guardian carved from stone, and Red Hawk, though fevered, whispered thanks in his tongue, words Jonah did not understand yet felt in his bones, and by dawn the chief's warriors who had survived the ambush found them, their faces hard with suspicion, until they saw their leader alive, wrapped in Jonah's coat, his life saved by the hands of a cowboy who owed them nothing. Red Hawk raised a weak hand and declared to his people that Jonah was a friend, a brother carved by the spirits themselves. And the warriors, though still wary, lowered their weapons, allowing the stranger into a circle no white man had entered without fear. But Jonah, humble as ever, only tipped his hat and said he'd done what any man ought to do, though in truth he knew most men would have ridden the other way. And as he turned to leave, Red Hawk called after him with a voice stronger than his body, promising that the debt of life would not go unpaid. And that promise lingered in Jonah's mind as he rode back into the sunrise, unaware that the very next day the chief would return, not with warriors or vengeance, but with something far more surprising, something that would change Jonah's path forever. His daughter, a vision of beauty and strength who carried the fire of her people in her eyes. And though Jonah did not yet know her name, the earth itself seemed to pause in anticipation of what fate was about to weave. And if you want to discover what happened when the giant Cowboy met the chief's daughter, when honor, love, and destiny collided beneath the endless sky, make sure you subscribe, because this is only the beginning of a story you'll never forget. The morning after Jonah Steele had vanished into the wide horizon with the dust still swirling behind his horse's hooves, the Comanche camp stirred with an energy unlike any other. For Chief Red Hawk, though still weak from his wound, had declared that the spirits demanded honor be repaid. And so, when the great sun rose over the prairie like a molten crown, the chief summoned his daughter, Star of Dawn, a young woman whose presence alone was like the first light that breaks after the longest night, her hair black as a raven's wing flowing down her back, her eyes holding both the fierceness of her father's lineage and the gentleness of a healer's soul. And when she stepped forward, wrapped in garments woven with patterns that spoke of centuries of heritage, every warrior bowed his head. For she was more than beauty. She was a symbol of hope for their people. Red Hawk, his voice carrying the weight of command, told her of the giant cowboy who had pulled him from the jaws of death, a man who fought like thunder and healed like rain, and that it was her duty, her honor, to ride with him and show gratitude that no gift of horses or weapons could match. For the spirits had whispered that her path was now tied to the strangers. And though her heart fluttered at the strangeness of it, Star of Dawn did not argue, for she knew that when the spirits spoke through her father, it was not a matter of choice but destiny. And so, by noon, the Comanche camp watched as she mounted a painted mare, her face calm though inside she felt the pounding of drums. In her chest, and with 2 silent escorts to guide her safely, she rode across the sweeping plains until the horizon broke, and there he was, Jonah Steele, the giant cowboy, sitting tall in his saddle as if he had grown out of the very earth itself, his rifle resting across his lap, his eyes narrowed against the wind. But when he saw her approaching, his heart, which had been iron hard for so many years, softened like clay in the summer rain, for never had he seen such a vision, a woman both fierce and tender, her gaze unflinching even before a man whose shadow dwarfed his horse. She stopped her mare only a few paces away, and in perfect English, soft but steady, she said, "You saved my father's life. I have come to honor you." And Jonah, caught off guard by her grace and the strange pull in his chest, tipped his hat and muttered something humble, as if saving a man from death was no more than fixing a fence. But Star of Dawn shook her head, her eyes locking into his as though she could see the secrets he buried, insisting that such a deed could not be dismissed, that the spirits themselves would be angered if gratitude was denied. Jonah tried to laugh it off, saying he wanted no reward, but as the wind stirred the grass around them, he realized it wasn't reward she brought. It was fate, and as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire, the escorts withdrew, leaving her with Jonah. For this was not a meeting of chance, but the first step of a path neither could escape. Together they rode, speaking little at first, their silence more comfortable than words, until she asked him why a man of such power chose solitude over glory, and he answered in that deep, weathered voice that sometimes a man who carries giants' shoulders also carries giants' sorrows, and that he had long ago learned the world doesn't always know what to do with a man who doesn't fit into its frame. And Star of Dawn, with the wisdom that comes from seeing both beauty and brutality, told him that perhaps the world had been waiting for him not to fit, but to stand where no one else could. And in that moment, Jonah realized that this was no ordinary woman, no token of thanks. This was a mirror held up to his very soul. And though the night fell and the prairie stars scattered across the heavens, neither felt fear, only the stirring of something far larger than themselves. But destiny is never without trial, and even as they shared the firelight, far beyond the hills, the raiders, who had attacked the Comanche, were gathering again, furious that their prey had been stolen by a lone cowboy, and they swore vengeance, their leader snarling that he would put the giant in the ground and claim the chief's daughter as a prize. And so while Jonah and Star of Dawn spoke softly beneath the vast night sky, unaware of the storm moving toward them, the stage was being set for a clash that would test not just Jonah's strength or the chief's gratitude, but the very meaning of honor, love, and destiny on the endless plains. And if you want to witness how the giant cowboy and the chief's daughter face the storm together, make sure you subscribe, because the tale is just beginning, and the next chapter will shake the earth beneath their feet.